So welcome everybody. We are here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is reinforcement. And personally speaking, I love to eat and I love to eat out, and that's one of my biggest sources of reinforcement. But what we'd like to do today, beyond talking about just what we like, is really help all of you guys, because we've got a nice combination of participants today. We've got some service providers, we've got school people, service providers, we've got human service people as well. And what I'm really excited to see is we've got some parents and some self-advocates aboard too. So this is a fantastic mix of people. And I look forward to your input and, you know, a robust discussion at the end. But first, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping things. One is you came in on mute, so that helps us decrease background noise. Also, you'll see the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, which you can click on at any time if you'd like to ask a question or if you'd like to comment about some of the information that we're talking to you guys about. So just a quick introduction. As you can see, I'm Emily Helmbolt, excuse me, and I'm from VCU ACE, the Autism Center, and I work specifically with the Autism Education Consortium. So we're a regional program that provides behavioral consultation and intervention and professional development to school staff and teams. So let's take a minute and I'll pass the torch over to Teresa Crossan. And Teresa, you can introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I am Teresa Crossan and I'm with the TTAC at Old Dominion University. And I'm the Autism and Behavior Specialist there, and we serve regions 2 and 3. But certainly if you are from a different region and you've got a question, feel free to reach out at the end of this and I can connect you with the right folks or help you myself, depending on what some of your needs might be. But I'm very excited to be here today with Emily and with all of you guys.
Fantastic.
And yep, go ahead.
Sorry, Teresa, I was going to jump in real quick and just recognize and thank the two folks that we have supporting us today. Katie Thompson from VCU ACE. You'll see there, she's helping us facilitate the chat and do some other things for us. And then our tech support guru is Lucian Friel, and he's from VCU ACE as well. So we appreciate both of you guys' support with our Lunch and Learn today.
Awesome. So just a quick agenda here, because we really want to get into the meat of it. We're going to look at some preferences. We're going to look at the why and the how of reinforcement, how to determine what's reinforcing, and have some opportunities for question and answers at the end, as well as provide you all with some resources. And so with that, since we have a short time, we're going to jump in. And so those of you who came on in time, you might have already been able to play with the annotate feature. And if you have, you can use your stamp or the little circle, the marker piece, or you can put in chat. Would you rather? Now there is no middle of the road, no cheating here, guys. It's one or the other. If you absolutely had to do something, would you rather eat white chocolate or eat dark chocolate? I personally am a dark chocolate kind of girl. So either use your annotate feature or the chat box to let us know. Oh, dark chocolate is taking the lead. I know my husband thinks dark chocolate is gag nasty. He will not eat it. He thinks it's gross. He would be on that white chocolate side there. Wow, even in the chat. Oh, we finally got a white chocolate from Joan. It looks like other than Joan, we are a dark chocolate kind of crowd here. All righty. So let me see here. Oops. We're going to clear those and we're going to move on to the next one. Let's see. Would you rather get a hug or get a compliment? Would you rather get a hug or a compliment? Oh, we got a hug in the chat box as well. Oh, there's a hug popping up. Oh, we're a little more split this time because in the chat box, we got several hugs as well. We've got several get a compliments. So I'm a hugger, I'm a touchy-feely person, but I have to recognize that a lot of people are not. And in the world of COVID right now, I probably wouldn't want to hug as much as normal. But yes, somebody even put, Travis, good job. We're thinking of like compliment during COVID, but otherwise I'm usually a hugger, but also recognizing not everybody is very important as well. So I'm gonna clear these and we're gonna move on to another one here. Would you rather go for a jog or go see a movie? Which would you rather do? A jog or a movie? I only run if I'm being chased. Or when I was still in the school buildings, if one of our kids was escaping, I would run for that too. But other than that, I am not a jogger. I would definitely be a movie. So we look pretty split on this one as well. We've got a couple movies in the chat box as well. So what I kind of want to point out is, other than the dark chocolate, I think we only had one white chocolate person. Other than that, we were kind of split. There's not a all one size fits all or a one preference that fits all. We really do not all like the same things. Some of us cringe at the thought of a hug. Some of us love the hugs. Again, not in the COVID world that we're in right now. Some of us love dark chocolate. Some are like, no way, I want that white chocolate. That dark chocolate's too bitter. So there's nothing in the world that we all agree on, that we all prefer, and that we all want or like. And we're going to kind of look at that as we go along today and use that to shape some of our conversations as we move along. I'm going to play a quick little video for you here, and then we're going to have a little discussion about it. So a big takeaway there is that I think sometimes there's a misconception when we talk about reinforcement, that it's only for education, it's only for kids who have significant needs. But I hope that video kind of showed you reinforcement is part of every single one of our lives. It's part of everyday life. It is just how things work for us. It's why we do the things we do, why we continue to do the things we do, or why we start doing things more often, is because we all get reinforcement, and that's what drives our behaviors. And so if you have nothing else from that video but the mindset that it really is not just for certain types of kids, it's not just for kids, it's an everyday, all day, and every person thing that we have to think about. So without getting too deep into the woods of behavior, we do have to kind of understand where this reinforcement comes from when we look at what's happening in the world, especially when we're talking about our children at home or our students in the classroom. And really, our reinforcement comes through part of this, what we call the three-term contingency, or the behavior chain. And so an antecedent is what happens before a behavior. B, of course, is the behavior. What does the child do, or the learner do, or the other person do? And then C is the consequence. What happens immediately or immediately after the behavior or the response? And really, when we're talking about reinforcement, it is that consequence that we're really going to magnify. That's the part we're going to inspect a little bit more closely when we're talking about reinforcement, to help us understand if reinforcement's even occurring or not. So we need to understand all of those blocks, the ABC blocks of behavior, but really, again, we're thinking about reinforcement. It's that consequence part that we're really going to hone in on when we're thinking about reinforcement. So ultimately, hopefully between the video and just that chain of the ABC, the three-term contingency, we're going to realize that the pure and simple, easiest definition of reinforcement is that reinforcement is any consequence that increases the likelihood that a behavior will occur again in the future. And so anything that means that behavior is going to occur again or more often in the future, then something is reinforcing that behavior. So let's look at a couple examples, and you guys can either chat your answer, or if you're familiar with it, if you click on participants in the bottom screen there, a little screen will pop up with all the participants, but you'll see a yes and a no. So you can check yes or no there to let us know your answer. Or you can give a thumbs up in your camera. Just let us know if you think this is an example of reinforcement. So for this first one, Dad tells Khalil, put your coat on. And Khalil puts his coat on, and his dad takes him for a walk to the park. From then on, Khalil puts his coat on every time his dad tells him to from now on. Is this an example of reinforcement for the behavior of him putting on his coat? So think again of what that definition is of reinforcement. It's any consequence that increases the likelihood that that behavior will occur again in the future. Again, you can use the participants. We've got a check mark for yes. We've got some yeses popping up in participants. You can answer in chat or in the participants for us. Oh, lots of check marks, lots of yeses popping up in participants there. Awesome. So let's see. Yes. And the way we know this is that in the future, that behavior continued or increased, right? So we know that consequence, remember my magnifying glass, that's what we're focusing. The consequence of Dad taking Khalil on a walk to the park is a reinforcement in this instance for Khalil putting on his coat. All right, let's look at another one. I'm gonna clear all those answers there. And let's look at this one. I'll let you guys read it to yourselves. And when you think you know the answer, you can use the participants feature or the chat to let us know. We've got a couple answers popping up in here. It looks like, yep, looks like we've got some no's in there. So let's check and see. Right, so the behavior did not go up in the future. It did not continue to happen in the future. It actually went down, right? So what we find a lot of times, if we look at that consequence, we see sometimes like, well, of course smiling and tickling will make them want to do it again. Isn't that fun stuff, right? Everybody wants to be smiled at. Everybody wants these things. But what tells us whether it's reinforcement or not is the future of that behavior. How often are we seeing that behavior in the future? Just because we think smiles and tickles might be wonderful and reinforcing does not mean it is actually reinforcing. We have to look at what that behavior does in the future to really see if that consequence was reinforcement or not. You guys are on it. All right, let's see. One more here, I think. I've cleared out those answers. You can read that one for yourselves. And once you think you know, you can pop that up into the participants or the chat. Got some answers popping up. We've got a yes in chat. Looks like we have several yeses in our participants with the check marks there. So let's see. You guys are on it. And sometimes this confuses people, but the behavior increases in the future. So it is absolutely reinforcement. And this happens often. Chances are mom does not want the behavior of Brandy falling to the floor and crying to increase in the future. That's probably not a behavior we want to see continuing, but it is being reinforced. And so it's likely to continue in the future. And we have to stop and think about that. We'll look at that a little bit more as we move along. But the big takeaway here is no matter what, whether it's a behavior we want to see or not, if it continues in the future or it increases in the future, something is reinforcing it. And we're going to want to look a little more closely at that as we go along, or as we're looking at some of the things that are happening with our students or with our children at home. So you guys rocked that. That was pretty amazing. So we've learned already what reinforcement is. We've learned that it's a part of every single person's lives, not just our students or just our children's. So I want you to take a moment and in chat, reflect on a reinforcement in your week. What is something this week that you have done that has been reinforced by somebody? And how was it reinforced? So I'll give you an example. I've been working from home at my family's beach house in the Outer Banks, and my husband actually got to take some time off and come here this week. And so I started work at like 6:15 one morning so that I could be done earlier in the afternoon, and he took me to some of my favorite spots. So I have actually since then woken up earlier some other mornings so that I can enjoy that time in the afternoon. So it's been reinforced for me to get up earlier while he is here. So think about something for you and what you could put in the chat box for us, something that has reinforced what you have done this week. Vacuum in the house and got specific positive acknowledgement and praise. That's awesome, Travis. I like it. And you're more likely to do it again in the future. We love it. Exercise reinforced by others. I love that. Y'all with this exercise are making me feel bad. That is not any behavior I've been doing. I need to find some reinforcement for that because a couple of you now have that as yours. No sodas, 2 pounds down. That scale can be a really good reinforcer, can it? I love it. It's amazing what sodas do to you. Oh my goodness, too bad they taste so good. Yeah. Had dinner planned ahead of time, so it gave you more free time with family. So in the future, you are more likely to plan ahead because it gives you that reinforcement at the end. I like that you guys were so easily able to kind of figure out something that gave you reinforcement this week. Just again, to keep it in mind of when we're working with our students or our children at home, that what we're really looking for is something that we all need, use, get. It is part of our lives, and it's just a matter of looking at those things and seeing, is my behavior or is that behavior going to continue in the future for us? So you guys are on it.
So Teresa,
Yes.
if I can just jump in real quick.
Sure.
Edna gave a really nice example, greeting neighbors and they are smiling more. So her behavior of greeting those neighbors has resulted in them kind of reciprocating by smiling more, maybe waving. And that's a great example of social reinforcement, right?
Absolutely.
So, we're socially reaching out and we get that back. So that's a really good example of that.
Yeah. One of the handouts that kind of started this whole lunch and learn on reinforcement is there's a handout we'll give you a link to at the end. But I put on there even too, one of those things that's social, I'm from the South and we hold the door open for people. But after a while, if nobody says thank you or smiles at you, it's kind of hard to want to keep opening the door. But when you open the door for somebody and they smile and say thank you, that's reinforcement. I'm more likely to hold the door open for somebody or open the door for somebody again because I got that, just that social thank you or that smile or that nod of approval. Those things do matter to most of us. Again, reinforcement's different for people, so it may not be really reinforcing to be told thank you by some. But yeah, that social piece is huge, and sometimes we don't recognize that as really being reinforcement. So thanks for bringing that up, Emily. It really is. It's a nice piece of reinforcement. All right, so the other part of reinforcement is you really need to become the keeper of good things. And we're gonna show you here how Sheldon became the keeper of good things here for Penny.
Are you finished?
Well, thank you. How thoughtful. Would you like a chocolate?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Sheldon. I almost sat in your spot.
Did you? I didn't notice. Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh, hey, Kim. Yeah, you know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall.
I love that.
I know what you're doing.
Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
So basically, by becoming the keeper of the good things, which for Penny, it appears obviously that chocolate is a strong reinforcer for Penny. By being the keeper of those chocolates, of the reinforcers, Sheldon has basically increased Penny's desire to do the things he wants her to do. And that's really when we're looking at being parents or family members or caregivers or educators, is we need to become the keeper of those good things. We need to show that when you work with us, when you do the things we're asking to do, when you do what you need to do, we are going to provide those things that you are reinforced by. And want that child's then going to want to do the things you want them to do because you are the keeper of good things. They start to see you as that. Another part of this, though, that we need to watch out for is that if children have access to all the good things whenever they want them, there's no need to do the behaviors that you want them to do. So an example of this is I am highly reinforced by anything carb, let's put that out, but really, really, really reinforced by Texas Roadhouse rolls and butter, okay? And so it used to be that if, you know, my husband's like, hey, let's do the yard work and we'll go out to eat at Texas Roadhouse, I was more likely to help with the yard work because I really, really, really would do almost anything for a Texas Roadhouse roll. Love those things. But all of a sudden, my daughter started to work at Texas Roadhouse. And she brought rolls home all the time. I no longer had to help with the yard work to go get my Texas Roadhouse rolls. And so because I had access to them anytime I wanted them, they were no longer reinforcement for me. Does that make sense? So we have to think about that. If our kids have access to the iPad or YouTube all day long, and then you go, oh, we're gonna work so you can have YouTube, they've kind of already gotten it. It doesn't hold that value anymore. So Texas Roadhouse, now they do because she doesn't work at Roadhouse anymore. She's a teacher, so no more free rolls. But at that point, they had lost their value of reinforcement for me because I had access to them anytime I really wanted them. The next thing that's really a tip for helping us with reinforcement is remembering that reinforcement must be contingent. And all that really means is that we only reinforce when they do the desired behavior. And so one of the ways I like to do this is like a first then. And we count this as a visual for our students, but a lot of times I find it as a visual for myself as well. It's reminding me the behavior I want is reading this book. The reinforcement is that coloring book. And until that first thing happens, we're not going to give them the reinforcement of that thing that's in the then box. So it helps them understand what behavior their reinforcement is contingent on. But sometimes using this for our sake also helps. Wait a minute, I cannot let them have access to that until they do this type of thing for me or whatever task it is we're asking them to do. So it must be contingent. They must know why they're being reinforced. They need to know which specific behavior they're being reinforced for as well. And we need to make sure that we are only giving that reinforcement when it's the behavior we want to see. And I think this cartoon's a good example. Parents will recognize this and understand it, that, you know, you've got this toddler who says, this is great, and she's laying in the middle of her parents in the nighttime, and she says, I'm gonna have to wake up crying in the middle of the night more often. Well, if she's gonna do a behavior more often, that tells us that it's reinforcement, right? But are we reinforcing the undesired behaviors? We want to make sure that we're really only providing that reinforcement contingent upon the desired behaviors we're hoping to get out of our students or our children. And I think it was Travis. He said he had vacuumed and he got very specific praise, right? And I think sometimes our contingent reinforcement can also be helped if we tell that child, good job vacuuming the living room, instead of just good job. Good job for what? So helping them understand what the behavior was and why they're getting that praise now. So Travis gave us a great example when he gave us his reinforcement he got this week. All right. I think it's Emily's turn because I'm going to take a sip of coffee.
All right. Well, yes. You relax for a while, Teresa. So we're going to get into a couple more details about reinforcement. And this really kind of reiterates what we've already talked about. But basically, just to kind of bring it home, what we're talking about when we think about how do I reinforce, what do I reinforce with, and when do I do it? Research shows us time and time again, the more immediate we can be with our reinforcement, the better the association between the behavior and the reinforcement is, and the more effective the reinforcement is. So as soon as you can reinforce, it's very important. And I would say so many times in working with families and working with school teams over the years, what has happened is they put in place a lovely plan, super reinforcing, you know, nice and structured and that kind of thing. But the problem is there's too much delay between when the behavior occurs and when the reinforcement occurs. And so it's just not that effective. So when we close that gap and when we ensure the student recognizes that behavior equals reinforcement, then we definitely are on the right track. Another thing, you know, we just saw that cute little cartoon of the toddler in the bed with their parents. And if you're a parent, I'm sure, and I am very guilty of this, I did a lot of that when the kids were crying when they were young. And I was reinforced because I simply liked them being beside me most of the time. But the point here is there's something called unintentional or accidental reinforcement, right? So all of a sudden we realize this behavior is happening more. The behavior I really didn't want to happen more, like crying, like the example of Brandy, where she cried and screamed to get into the car, and so her mom decreased that demand. So I think we can all kind of identify the times in our lives where we accidentally reinforce a behavior with our student or our child. And that is an easy thing to do. And once you recognize it, it's just a matter of kind of rethinking, whoops, what behavior do I want to reinforce? And how can I kind of shape that interfering behavior to kind of get it where I need it to be? All right. Next. All right, so this is a video from America's Funniest Home Videos, and it's old, and I'm sure most of us have seen it. But let's just look at it real quick. It's just a quick few seconds to make a point. Okay, Teresa, that's great. Thank you. All right, you guys. So you clearly saw that toddler obviously had a rich history of reinforcement. When he cried, he would get attention from his parents. Because in the background, you may not have heard it, but his dad and his mom were kind of chatting back and forth. And if you've seen this video before, it is hilarious because they continue to walk away from the toddler. The crying decreases. The second he sees them, it goes right back up. So it shows that there's that history there of reinforcement. And that toddler has learned he can get things when he acts this way. So, you know, certainly some of that is natural and normal. And we want, you know, we have to respond to crying babies. We have to tend to their needs. But at some point in time, this doesn't work anymore. So it's very much, you know, kind of recognizing that. But I love that clip, so I had to show it.
At one point, even the dog follows mom and dad into the kitchen so that he's not giving the baby attention. It's amazing.
It's a smart dog. So we're going to touch on the types of reinforcement because I think sometimes, and I'm guilty again doing this, I think we think of reinforcement very kind of linear, very restricted, like only edibles or only the iPad. That is a very popular in classroom reinforcer. And I certainly understand why. It can be very, very effective. And especially in the case of the iPad, there are a lot of things you can do on an iPad that are reinforcing. So let's skip on to the next slide and look at the actual types, just so we get a better idea. And this is where you guys can come in and you can participate here. So in the chat, I'm just gonna make it easy. In the chat, pick which ones of these are examples or types of reinforcement. Okay. And type the letters that you think apply or. Yep. Excellent. Okay, you guys get the idea for sure. I have fooled no one here. All of these are different types of reinforcement. So nice job on that. All right, so to be clear, when we're talking about different types, one category is edible, and that includes food or drink. And what's reinforcing edible to me may not be something that Teresa likes. I like a huge variety of foods. Some people do not. A lot of our kids, whether they're our children or our students on the spectrum, have some sensitivities with food, either allergies or just texture or just oral sensitivities. So understanding which items are appealing to them is important. Activity. So a lot of times tangible and activity are kind of intertwined when we put in place reinforcement, but specifically they can be teased out. Sometimes we want to play a game. So that's an activity. Sometimes we want to engage in sports. You know, it might be that one of our kids loves basketball. So after they complete a task inside or a chore, we can give them the basketball. They can go outside and engage in that, or we can engage in that with them. So the next thing, item and tangible, that's the actual thing. That's, you know, a new toy. It's a new Pokemon card. It's something that is a thing that can be given to the person. Okay, and attention. This is a huge category. You know, this involves that social reinforcement. So that can be a variety of things. It can be your typical verbal praise. It can be a high five. It can be getting closer to the child. It can be hugging them, sitting beside them. It's all based on what they like. So there's a list that Teresa is sharing with you guys that has, it's much more exhaustive than what I have here. But it's really interesting what can be considered social reinforcement. But I think what I'd really like to emphasize here is social reinforcement is so important to us. We're humans, we are social beings. We have to have social attention. And sadly, in some cases, some of our students or some of our kids, it's really hard to figure out how to socially reinforce them. Some things like praise might be aversive to them. They may not like to get praise. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they have auditory sensitivities. So because of that, again, it kind of goes back to my point, which is, you know, knowing that child and really kind of figuring out what works for them is important.
And I did put 2 links in the chat box for you guys that are some type, 2 types of just It's really just, one says it's a checklist, but it's not so much that. It's just a great list of things to sometimes help you get thinking about, oh, wow, I never really considered that could be a our. So it just gets you, it's not an exhaustive list. It would be impossible to list every single thing that might be a preference or reinforcer for our kids, but it just gets your mind going of, oh yeah, he also likes, right? So it just gives you some of those ideas.
Thanks, Teresa. So I'm looking at the time too, Teresa. Do we want to allow 10 minutes for question and answers? Okay. So we might have to not skip, but just not spend a whole lot of time on a couple of these. But the point for these next two are, another rule of reinforcement is it has to match the effort. So in this case, this example is 1 math problem equals 1 M&M. So, you know, what, and then in this example, go ahead, you're good. In this example, you get a whole math test. Well, that might equal a bigger reinforcer. I'm not advocating a whole package of M&Ms, but I'm making a point here that we really do have to match that reinforcement to effort. Because if we are not providing enough reinforcement to something that's really hard for a child, we may not get that behavior that we want. All right. So we talked a little while ago about preferences, and you guys were able to engage in a few activities where you expressed your preferences. And as we know, they vary. We know with each kid, they can be different. And, you know, we might find that our kids like, you know, we might have 3 children and they all like the iPad, but each one of them likes to do something different on the iPad. So how do we determine those preferences? Because I tell you, once you figure out what the preferences are for your student or your child at home, it's very effective to pull out those and use those as motivators for either getting tasks done or to just have that behavioral momentum, to have them really motivated to do things. All right, so what's the preference assessment? Go ahead, Teresa. Let's just fly through this animation. You can continue. There we go. Okay. So basically, it is a process to figure out, plain and simple, what are preferred items or activities or edibles that can be used potentially for reinforcement. You know, what are the things they like best? So we might have a few things that we're testing out with a child or a student, and we want to develop kind of a list or a hierarchy of which one's the most favorite. Because we probably want to use that one that day for reinforcement. Also, what are conditions under which the preferences might change? So is it in different environments that they like different things? Certainly in a restaurant, you're going to have, you know, more motivation for an edible per se, if the child's hungry, you know, and the child might associate different environments with different preferences. So understanding that. So now we're going to touch on a couple different types, and we're not going to dive deeply into these, obviously. But what we're trying to do here is give you guys a couple of tools that you could use pretty easily in the home to get a better idea of what is motivating for your child. One is called a free operant, and some of these are a little bit technical in their terminology, but they're actually fairly easy to do. So we'll explain them pretty quickly. There's the other one's called single stimulus. All right, so the first thing you want to do in either one of these is you want to create a list of preferred items. So what are the things that you know are preferred already? What are things that are reinforcement? And you can get creative here. So you can even think to yourself, well, you know, if my child likes regular Doritos, maybe they'd like Cool Ranch Doritos, okay? If my child likes Paw Patrol, maybe they would like Paw Patrol stickers instead of watching that. So it's really kind of thinking about that and developing a list. Go ahead, Teresa. All right, and making a plan. You know, how are you going to present the items? How long will the child have access to those items? What is the plan B if the child doesn't make a choice? Am I going to take it back and try it again? So it really is coming up with a consistent way to show the child these items or activities and getting that feedback that you need to determine, yeah, it is something that they like or not really. Another point to make here really quickly is, does your child exhibit or engage in dangerous behaviors or unsafe behaviors or extreme problem behaviors if items are restricted? So you want to know that ahead of time because you really want to plan for that. You know, it could be that you don't introduce those highly preferred items because you know they are. Instead, you choose other items that you think might be appealing to them or you know are kind of appealing, and kind of develop your list based on that. Okay, so you know you want to consider, of course, safety first, but also, you know, if you already know something is at the top of the list, kind of introducing those other things that might be close behind are important too, because that's all information you can use to motivate the child in the future. All right. So free operant. So pretty much what we're talking about here, go ahead and flip through these, Teresa, because I am looking at the time, it's getting pretty close. A free operant is pretty much when you basically have the child exposed to a few different things. It could be 4, it could be 6 different things that you think they might like, okay? And they're placed in different areas of the room or the assessment area. And pretty much you let the child freely walk around and choose what they like. And you make note of that. Well, you know, this child spent quite a few seconds to a couple minutes hanging out with the dinosaur, the 2 dinosaurs, and he interacted like they are fighting and stuff. And he spent a little bit of time with the lighted little stimulating toy. That was okay. So you want to keep note of that, and you develop your list from that. We have a video here, which I'm gonna skip, Teresa. I think because what you can do is we're recording this. You can come back and check out that video, and we'll share the resource as well if you want to look it up. They're readily available YouTube videos. If you do a search for single stimulus or do a search for free operant, they will be pulled up, okay? Easy to find. So single stimulus, and this is only going to take a second, that's pretty much when you show one item or expose one thing to the child at a time, okay? The other items are hidden or tucked away somewhere, but you are offering that child one item at a time. Could be a book, it could be a toy, it could be an edible. And when you introduce edibles, you do want to make sure that you, 2 things. One is give them a small amount so they remain motivated to try others. And we really recommend that you do 2 different assessments. Like if you're going to do edibles in one assessment, and then your next assessment can be with those other items that are non-edibles. So the research shows that you really want to kind of tease those apart. And if the child is interested, decide how long you're going to let the child have access to that item. And you want to develop kind of a common language with the child of my turn to take that item back, so you can immediately give them something else to see if they're interested. All right, keep going. That's the video, and you can find that from our link. And now we have moved on to questions and answers, and I knew I flew through the preference assessment part, but you know, the main point is you can, through observation at home, have some pretty practical ways of figuring out what does my child like to do? What can I use to put in place when I'm trying to either support them with perhaps virtual learning, or trying to get them to clean their room, or whatever the case might be. You can really build that behavioral momentum by using those preferences for reinforcement. All right, so now what we'd like to do is open it up to you guys. If you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah. Emily and Teresa, that was just a really, really wonderful presentation on the sort of who, what, when of reinforcements. And I know I had a lot of takeaways from this myself. And if the participants in today's session just want to sort of add something to the chat that they plan to take away and implement in this coming week, we would love to see those. And then also any questions that you have for our experts while you have them right here in front of you.
I also put in the chat 2 more links. One is just to the PDF. That's a front and back 1-page type deal of Family's Guide to Reinforcement that kind of covers a lot, most of the areas, if not all the areas that Emily and I just sped through in those 45 minutes. And then the second one is the same content, but in a plain text ADA accessible format for you as well. So you can follow either of those links or both to download those documents if you'd like. So again, if you guys would not mind, we love to know what your takeaways were from this. There's actually research that we quote a lot when we're doing trainings that basically says that if you're in something like this and you learn something new, if you don't use it or do something with it within 48 hours, chances are you will not. And so we really like to encourage you to think of, okay, what's the one thing, if nothing else, I'm going to walk away and I'm going to do something with this information in the next 48 hours. We also find if you put it in chat or you tell somebody, it increases your accountability and your likelihood to actually follow through with that one thing. So we would love to see in the chat your one takeaway, one thing you know you're going to do because of something you heard or did today.
So I'm going to throw out something that it makes me more aware of. And this happens every time I present it and every time I hear people talking about it. And I think it goes with the rule of thumb that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but as an old dog myself, I definitely learn new tricks. And my new trick for today is really that immediacy of reinforcement. I think sometimes here at home, when my 14-year-old deserves some reinforcement, she's done something good, I'm over here doing something else. I'm cooking dinner, I'm finishing up a project, whatever. And I don't tune into that and reinforce it as quickly as I can. So we've got some comments here. Someone's using some of the suggestions in IEP meetings, plan to print off the reinforcement pages and review of the family to explain reinforcement. That's great. Sharing this with families. And thank you, Wendy, for that. You know, we really were trying to make this so that parents can see this. I can do this. I can do this pretty easily at home.
Yep, we got somebody who says that they like the idea of using the first then as a reminder for the adults, not just the kids. It just helps really put that contingency in the forefront of your mind when you're working with your students or with your children at home. So and that's what I said. I'm the one who does that for myself sometimes, especially when it's something a little more challenging or something new to me with a particular child, is I for my sake, put it in there. So I'm glad you were able to take that as something you would be able to do. And also using the Big Bang clip to explain reinforcement to families and coworkers. So, you know, we do trainings a lot on universal design for learning, and some of us really are those people who like to see it in action, not just hear about it. So sometimes it's great to be able to show our coworkers, staff, or families it from a different neural pathway there. So that's amazing.
Really wonderful. Well, I'm going to post here in the chat. Feel free to continue chatting if you have more, but I just want to make sure everybody knows about the next week's Lunch and Learn. We're going to have Noelle Woolard as well as Robin Cleary from Louisa County, and they're going to be talking about parents and how to foster that social and emotional learning while providing virtual instruction, which is applying to a lot of us right now. So, and then we'll have Emily coming back with us on the 8th with Whitney Ham. So we'll want to hopefully see you all in those as well. Any other chats?
Thanks everybody for spending some time with us today. And here's the resource slide. So you'll see the that really nice PDF graphic, highly graphic resource that Teresa created, the Family's Guide to Reinforcement. Check that out and you can use it directly with parents. There's also the vcuautismcenter.org, our website for ACE, that has a whole parent section. And then of course, like we said before, YouTube, we get a lot of this stuff off of YouTube. And it is just, I think, very effective to have videos to use in instruction with parents and with staff in the schools. I think it really works.
Thanks, guys, for joining us today. It was wonderful to virtually see and hear everybody. I can't wait till I can see more people not on a screen, but I do sure appreciate it when I'm able to spend some time with folks outside of myself and my family. So,
That is true. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Y'all